Us and them is a mental model that I think shows up really a lot in Minnesota.
It is very specific to naming one right way of thinking. When there is only one right way, that means anybody else who might have a different way of thinking or being and living, hold a different set of values, is wrong.
It's both what happens in an individual power holder's mind or an individual person who's in the dominant or mainstream group. I'm a white person. I have been trained a lot to do us and them thinking. It manifests then in the whole systems. It's one of the places our equity gap is coming from.
So when I think about us versus them, or us and them as a mental model, I think about polar opposites on a magnet, polarized ends that would push one another away. And so I think the us versus them is very polarizing and creates a really firm distance. And I also think of a tension rod. A tension rod needs tension.
Yes.
To sustain whatever is going to be hung on it, whether it's political beliefs, religious beliefs, beliefs around gender. Wow. So I think about a tension rod.
It's like it's not doing its job unless there's real tension, and that's true, I think, for the us's in us and them. It's like, okay, part of our job is to create these institutions that will increase that tension.
I think the other words that come into my mind when thinking about us versus them, us and them, stick with your own kind, or a phrase, stick with your own kind.
Yeah.
And I thought, wow, that goes back to, in history, as I understand it, it takes me back to the era where segregation was firmly rooted in that idea.
Part of the words that come to my mind are actual signs in the U.S. South. You know, this is the Negro waiting room in the bus station. This is the school that so-called colored children can go to. Those are the words that were used to make a whole legal and social structure around us and them. That's how deep us and them is.
Thinking about the work that I do, very focused on creating organizational change. The us versus them mental model shows up in ways of resistance. It can be very quiet resistance, because you can show up in meetings and propose a more adaptive way of meeting people's needs on a human level, on a systemic level. And if people really don't agree with that, they may not say it in a meeting. Then what happens outside of the meeting? There's another meeting. And it's a meeting between people who are very similar in thinking, like, no, there's only one right way to provide this support, to work with people from this community.
When racism came along, and you know, the kind of racism we're talking about is only happened when Europeans, again my ancestors, started colonizing everybody else. It had all kinds of templates to just fit right into, because there was already a strong us and them. You know, I probably better not start naming the institutions, or we won't be able to, you know, but religious institutions, education, philosophy, you know, social structures, us and them was well in place. And so Europeans and now white United Statesers just grooved right in.
So this mental model of us versus them perpetuates racism, because there's a high tendency to focus on the differences. It can amplify the distance between different groups, different racial groups, and make sure that there's no bridges built. So the counteraction to the mental model of us versus them is to build trust. To build that trust, a solid ground of trust that can leverage that kind of relationship to push people, challenge people to think, what if we find two commonalities across racial difference? Let's start there.
I firmly believe, and I see in my experience, that we long for each other. We long to be connected across these constructed lines of difference. And tapping into that that longing is not easy. But it's not easy because the trust that Cardina spoke about is, you know, it has been long ago lost. So it's not easy, but to go to that heart level of my survival, my very existence is completely intertwined with your very existence. We can't do it, but doing it together. When we get to that level, my experience is a lot of things open up.